All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're talking about one of the most powerful ideas ever, nationalism. We're going to look at how this one concept, the idea of a nation, went from a dream to a force so strong it completely redrew the map of Europe and eventually the whole world.
And to kick things off, let's look at this image. It perfectly captures that initial dream. This is a vision from 1848 by an artist named Frédéric Sorrieu. You can see all the peoples of the world marching together, past the broken symbols of monarchy, all toward the Statue of Liberty. It's this incredible, hopeful vision of freedom and unity.
But was it really that simple? In this explainer, we're going to follow the journey of this idea, how it sparked revolutions, built brand new countries, and how, somehow, this beautiful vision of unity also planted the seeds for some of the worst conflicts in history. You know, it's kind of hard to imagine, but before all this, the very idea of a nation just wasn't a thing for most people. Europe was this patchwork of huge multinational empires. You weren't, say, German or Hungarian, you were just a subject of the Habsburg Emperor. Your only connection to all those other people was that you all answered to the same king. So, what lit the fuse? What was the spark? Well, for that, we have to go to the one event that took this idea of a nation from theory to reality, the French Revolution. See, the revolutionaries didn't just get rid of a king. They were actively trying to build a new, shared identity for everyone. They introduced concepts like the fatherland and the citizen. They created a new flag for everyone to rally behind, and an assembly that actually represented the people, not just the king's favorites. They were literally forging a nation where before there had only been subjects. Now, an idea this big, it wasn't going to stay put in France for long. As Napoleon's armies swept across Europe, they became these unintentional salesmen for revolution, bringing the ideas of liberty and nationhood with them wherever they went. And right here is where things get complicated. Napoleon was this two-sided coin. On the one hand, he was a liberator. He got rid of old oppressive feudal laws and brought in modern legal codes. But on the other hand, he was an invader. People pretty quickly figured out that this liberation came with a price: French control, high taxes, and being forced to fight in Napoleon's army. So after Napoleon is finally defeated, the old guard of Europe, all the monarchies, they get together and basically try to stuff this nationalism genie right back in the bottle. They held this big meeting called the Congress of Vienna, and their goal was simple: hit the undo button. They wanted to erase everything the French Revolution had changed. So they put the old royal families back on their thrones and redrew the map to stamp out any revolutionary hotspots. Their whole game plan? Turn back the clock. But you can't really put an idea like that away once it's out there. This timeline just shows how it kept bubbling back to the surface. The idea was too powerful. All through the 1800s, you see these waves of revolution pop up. A big one in 1830, and then a massive, continent-wide explosion in 1848. And this quote from the Austrian statesman Metternich, it just nails it. He knew that France was ground zero. Every time things kicked off in Paris, the shockwaves would spread, and suddenly you'd have people in Brussels or Warsaw demanding their own nations and their own freedoms. So what were these revolutionaries actually fighting for? Well, it was mostly the educated middle class leading the charge, and they had a clear wish list. They wanted to get rid of the old empires and create their own nation-states. And they wanted those nations to have constitutions, parliaments, and basic rights like freedom of the press. So the revolutions of 1848 were happening everywhere. But here's the thing. They mostly failed. The old order crushed them. And what happens next is a huge, unexpected twist in our story. Let's look at Germany. In 1848, a bunch of liberal professionals and businessmen all gathered together. They drafted a democratic constitution for a new, united Germany. They even offered the crown to the King of Prussia. And what did he do? He rejected it, famously calling it a crown from the gutter. And just like that, the democratic dream was crushed. And this is the pivot. After the liberals failed, the very same conservative leaders who hated the revolution, the kings and the aristocrats, had a light bulb moment. They realized they could hijack nationalism for themselves. They could use its power not to create free democracies, but to build powerful, top-down, authoritarian states. And the poster child for this new approach was Prussia's chief minister, Otto von Bismarck. He had this famous line where he said the great questions of the day wouldn't be decided by speeches and votes. That was the liberals' mistake, but by iron and blood. He meant war. And that's exactly what he did. Prussia used its army to unite Germany on its own terms.
At the very same time, a similar story was playing out in Italy. Italy wasn't a country yet. It was just a collection of little kingdoms and states, most of them controlled by foreign powers like Austria or Spain. A politician at the time called it just a geographical expression. And the way Italy came together is just fascinating. It was this wild mix of strategies. You had this brilliant, calculating politician, Cavour, making clever deals to push Austria out of the north. And at the same time, you had this romantic, fiery revolutionary, Garibaldi, leading an army of volunteers to free the south. In the end, they managed to stitch the whole peninsula together under one king. So by the late 1800s, the dream of the nation-state is a reality. Germany and Italy are on the map. But that early idealistic vision of people marching toward liberty, that's starting to fade. And the idea of the nation is beginning to show a much, much darker side. You see, nationalism completely changed its tune. It stopped being about let's free our people, and it became our people are better than your people. It turned into this intense competition to prove your nation was the strongest, usually by conquering other people. And this aggressive attitude directly fueled the age of imperialism. And if you want to see where this dangerous new nationalism was at its most explosive, look no further than the Balkan Peninsula in southeastern Europe. This whole area used to be controlled by the Ottoman Empire, but as the empire got weaker, the region turned into a hotbed of conflict. It even earned a nickname, the Powder Keg of Europe. So here's how this powder keg was set to blow. As different groups in the Balkans broke away from the Ottomans, they formed their own nations. But instead of peace, they immediately became jealous rivals, each one wanting more land, usually at their neighbor's expense. And to make it all worse, the big European powers, Russia, Germany, Britain, were all meddling in the region, backing different sides to expand their own influence. This messy, tangled web of rivalries was the fuse that would light the First World War. And that brings us full circle, doesn't it? The idea of nationalism started as this beautiful dream of liberty and unity. But as we've seen, the very thing that brings an us together can create a dangerous them. It really forces you to ask, at what point does a nation's story of pride and unity cross the line and become a threat to everyone else?